one thing. Okay, you got that. And people say you can't be perfect. Well, again, let's go back to mathematics. Can you have addition test perfect? Can you get to the point that you get it perfect? You can. Most of the time. And then you can get to subtraction. Most of the time. When we get older, sometimes it doesn't get as good. But as we continue, so as God gives us trials, can we get to the point that we can overcome those? Yes, that's what it's talking about. And then He then says, okay, I got another one for you. Now we're going to go up a grade. We're going from, what grade are you in? 7th? What grade is she in? 6th. So next year you'll be in 7th grade. You're going to be promoted. Does God promote us? He does. And so as we have a relationship with Christ, then we need life-changing experience with God. And we learned about that in this vision. It's a progression. One must take special care of the health that God has given us. Why?
It goes away.
Pardon?
It goes away.
It goes away? Health problems goes away? Yeah? Why else? Does our body belong to us? Who's it belong to? What does 1 Corinthians 6 tell us? How does it belong to God? Christ bought it, so it's not ours. But Walt, this is my body and I can do whatever I want to with it. I can drink, I can smoke, it's nobody's business. Do people say that? Oh yeah, they tell me that. This is my body, I can do whatever I want to with it. But that's a lie from Satan. It's not our bodies. It belongs to God. One must take special care of the health God has given us. I didn't mention something this morning. Let me share now. And I learned this from an old Baptist preacher off of Billy Graham's radio station, Black Mountain radio station, years and years ago. I was driving home and I was listening to him, and he was talking about fasting. And I sat in my driveway and just listened to him as he finished his sermon. And it made sense. In the Bible, it talks about fasting. And in fasting, there's physical benefits, but is there spiritual benefits? Who works in healthcare? Anybody work in healthcare? Did you know that we have a no muscle? Did y'all know we have a no muscle? We do. It's in the brain. It's that muscle that says no. And some of us, it's real weak. And some of us, it's stronger. And what this old preacher was talking about is fasting strengthens the no muscle. Does that make sense? Have you ever fasted a day? Does that take strength? Yeah, it does. Everybody else is eating this and this and this, and you're fasting. It's kind of tough. This is why it says if you can overcome appetite, you can overcome any other temptation. That's powerful. And what does that mean? As you build this no muscle of saying no to appetite, whether it's that Blizzard from Dairy Queen, or it might be that chocolate pie, or that macaroni and cheese, stuff that we grew up with. And as we say no, and the more we say no, the stronger our muscle gets. And then when something else comes up, it can be totally unrelated to diet, we got a good strong muscle because we've been working out. And we can say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's wrong. Does that make sense? And that's where we learn this, is from this vision. Overactivity contributes to lack of usefulness and tiredness, which impacts the health and interpersonal relationships. I will tell you, this is my toughest one. Y'all, there's a lot to be done. And there's not a lot of workers. Is it true? Amen. The workers are few. The work is many. do we see a problem did Elder White have a problem with this?
Yes.
She said that if he had changed and followed these health principles, he would have lived longer. I had a good friend. Anybody know Bob Jorgensen? Y'all knew Bob? Good friend of mine. You knew Bob? Great guy. Bob he went all over the world teaching on true education, teaching on agriculture, teaching on other matters. And he might be 2 o'clock in the morning out with lights working in his garden because he was out helping his neighbor cut wood that he was trying to share Christ with. See, his neighbor, he didn't believe in God. And Bob took every opportunity he could to share with that neighbor about God. And so if that neighbor needed help, boom, Bob was over there. And then he was out with lights in the middle of the night working in his garden. Or it might be answering emails from Africa or from Venezuela at 3 o'clock in the morning. Folks want to know about true education. And as I spoke at Bob's funeral, I said, how do you say no to say yes longer? How do you say no in order to say yes longer? It's a tough one because there's so much good work to be done. And there's not a lot of time left, y'all. I mean, just listen to it. No, I don't get caught up in the news and just obsess in watching the news. But you have to have situational awareness. Y'all know what situational awareness is? See, loss of situational awareness is what kills most wildland firefighters. They're not paying attention to the weather. They're not paying attention to the fire. They're just cutting a line. They're not paying attention to where the safety zone is. Or maybe it's in a structure fire. They're not in there and they're not watching fire behavior. They're not looking at as the little, anybody work as a fireman? No, a fireman? They're not watching to see, the signs of maybe a flashover may be coming. Or maybe a backdraft. Or maybe the incident commander out there is talking to his wife on the phone and he's not looking at he's not reading the smoke. He's not watching the structure, and then boom, the building falls in on his firefighters. You've got to have situational awareness. So yes, we need to know what's going on in the world, but don't obsess on just sitting there watching the news all day long. I believe we're close. And I think we need to be ready. And as we look here, that we need to get out and get work done, but we can wear ourselves out prematurely. Does that make sense? One must give the mind time to rest. Do we give the mind time to rest? Now, y'all, we've known this for how many years? 159 years. Soon, June 6th, it will be 160 years. But do we give our mind time to rest? Now, there's some folks, they just rest their mind all the time. It's amazing what I see of people today that don't work. People call me with health problems from all over. And there's so many people who don't work anymore. But there are people who do work, and they work hard, and they don't take time. There's a reason that we're allowed to take vacation at work. There's a reason that we have a break in the morning at the middle of the shift and the break on the other side, the second half of the shift. Because business knows that they'll get more production out of you if you have a time to take a little break. Is it true? So we need a time to let our minds rest and not just constantly go, 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 go. Sometimes folks stay up 1, 2 in the morning watching television, on the internet, and their brains just don't stop. They need to rest and just smell the roses. Listen to the birds. Watch the creek run by. Let your brain rest a little bit. The mind affects the whole body, we learned here. And I got this information from the General Conference, which had who spoke on this first vision. And so they broke it down on those items that we learned from that first vision. The mind affects the whole body. We read that in Sabbath school. The stresses involved in overwork can contribute to one's unhealthy mindset, such as depression. But what about the stresses involved in overwork? Can that make you short? Can that make you not a nice person? Not only to your neighbors or your coworkers, but maybe even to your children and your spouse. Or maybe more so to your children and your spouse. Now let's go back to our mission. What is our mission? To point the sin-sick soul to Christ. That neighbor that lives next to you, like Bob had that neighbor who was an atheist. If Bob was just mean as a striped snake, do you think that fellow would have wanted to have any part of Bob's religion? No. Or what about that person who works at work with you, and you go and you sit at break time, or you talk about things, you talk about your kids, you talk about your husbands, or whatever you talk about, and you're a mean person. You're a short person. I say short meaning with your words. Is that a way to point the sin-sick soul to Christ? So we learned here that stress involved in overwork can contribute to one's unhealthy mindset. It could be depression, but it could be other issues too. Did you know that World Health Organization, can anybody tell me the number one diagnosis in America today? I had a group of physicians I was speaking to. It was a large group of physicians. And I said, what is the number one diagnosis today? And they, cardiovascular disease. No, it's the number one cause of death. But what's the number one diagnosis? Stress. But soon to be replaced by, according to the World Health Organization, depression. And that was prior to COVID that they were saying this. We're even seeing more depression today. We should be especially careful not to cause each other one shade of sadness or trial. That's a big sentence, isn't it? That's a big job. We should be especially careful not to, that means don't do it, cause each other one shade of sadness or trial. Do you know any people that just enjoy getting somebody? Do you know people like that? Do you know people who, when someone says something, they might come back with and get them back? Or some people just like making people miserable. Do you know people like that? There's people out there that just enjoy making people miserable. But then what about, let's say we're not those people. But every once in a while we get tired, we get whatever, and we do make people that way. Well, what's this say? We should be especially careful not to cause each other one shade of sadness or trial. So what could help us from doing that?
You need to have a glad disposition.
A glad disposition? How about getting your sleep at night? How about eating whole food instead of Twinkies? Drinking your water, getting exercise, following those 8 basic laws of health. The relationship of diet and disease and the simple methods of combating poor health. The relationship of diet and disease and the simple methods in combating poor health. It's interesting, as I would listen to Dr. Campbell talk about just the one law, diet. I'm not talking about, he didn't talk a whole lot about the others, except he did talk about water, which the World Health Organization says water is part of nutrition. But he would talk about how if you would eat a certain diet consistently, contiguously. Do you know what contiguous means? See them boards on the floor? They are contiguous. There's not a board missing anywhere. Every place has a board. That's contiguous. All the time, eating healthy. So the relationship of diet and disease, our diet can affect disease in the simple methods of combating poor health through those 8 laws of health. And that's where the 8 laws of health came in, was during this vision. I had this couple come out of Knoxville one time, and they both work in healthcare. They were in their mid-60s, having some health issues, so they drove over to Newport for some help. And as the man sat down, I started to sit down, and his wife goes, "Can I run to the restroom first?" I said, "Sure." And so she went to the restroom, and the man's sitting there, and my youngest son, Carson, made this big old poster, and it's got a picture of each of the 8 laws of health. And then nutrition, exercise, water, fresh air, sunshine, those underneath it. And this man's just staring at it. And then he goes, "That is the key to health." And I said, "What you talking about?" He says, "I've worked in healthcare my whole career." He said, "Those 8 things are the key to health." Anybody a school teacher? Any teach school? Some of y'all. Okay. Have you ever, as a school teacher, made a master key, and you punch holes in it, and you set it over top where them circles are that the black's supposed to be? And if there's no black, you take out your red pen and mark it up real good. That's the master key to the test. Those 8 laws of health are the master key. It's real simple. And this fellow who'd worked in healthcare his whole career, he goes, if we do that, we can have health. Now, why are those 8 laws the key? Because the guy who made them said they are. Right? I've got a Chevy pickup truck. I'm having a problem with it right now. When I go to start it, I'll crank it. And sometimes it cranks fine. And sometimes I'll do this for a good 5 minutes and it don't crank. Well, do I go to a Dodge manual? Do I go to a Toyota manual? What manual do I go to? A Chevy Silverado 1500 2007. That's the one I look at. God made us, and then He said, here's the keys. Follow this, and you'll be a whole lot healthier. The importance of plain and wholesome food. See, it's not T. Colin Campbell, though Campbell did coin the word plant-based. See, I'm not vegan. I got leather shoes. So vegans won't let me be vegans. So I can't be a vegan. I'm plant-based. But T. Colin Campbell's the guy who came up with that. And we may say that the importance of plain and wholesome food, well, you can go and quote all these people out there today. Did you know that Harvard now teaches this? They do. It's amazing. Read Harvard. Harvard has some really good research on healthy fruits, vegetables, whole food, and variety, just like Campbell does over at Cornell. It's the rocks crying out, y'all. It is not T. Colin Campbell that came up with this. It is not Harvard that came. And I really like Dr. Campbell. He is a great guy. But he's not the guy who came up with this. It's the importance of plain and wholesome food. It was how long ago? 159 years ago. Let me tell you a real quick story on Dr. Campbell. Who watched Forks Over Knives? Let me tell you a story he told us in class. Campbell grew up, he moved to Southwest Virginia when he was about 8 years old. His daddy had a dairy farm, beef cattle, and he grew up as a farm boy. I can relate to that. As a boy, I lived on a dairy farm and beef cattle. And Campbell, he said he had a hypothesis that we need more protein. We need more animal protein. We need more dairy. He got Cambridge to get involved in the study. He got the backing of the American Dairy Association, the Meat Association, Cornell. And his hypothesis was we need to eat more meat and we need to eat more dairy. So he's in the study. Going to prove this. Now, he said he brought in the best, the guys who do numbers, not statisticians, but the guys who do numbers, like the insurance guys. Yes, exactly. Yes, those guys. And he said he had the really good ones, the best ones, to count the numbers. So he had no question that the numbers were real. But guess what? The numbers were 180 degrees off of his hypothesis. 180 degrees, he said. What does he do with it? Now, how many of us took statistics? Probably the best thing I learned in statistics is you don't trust statistics, because you can make them do what you want to. So, Campbell's trying to figure out, what do I do? Now, parents and grandparents, listen to this. This is very important. Cornell was supporting him. Cambridge was supporting him. The dairy industry was supporting him. It's good to your supporters to do what they want you to do. The meat industry was supporting him. But what does he do? The evidence is 180 degrees off. The numbers are good. What does he do? In his ear, he could hear his father. Here he's in New York, right outside of New York City, where Cornell University is. And he can hear his father's voice as he was a little boy in Southwest Virginia saying, and this is what he tells us in class, Colin never lie. Colin never lie. Colin never lie. As he's growing up as a boy, Colin never lie. And you know what he did? He published the truth based on his father's voice that he could steer it. And his father was dead. But see how important what we tell our children is? Susie, never lie. Johnny, never lie. I believe that as we continually teach our children, I believe it will pay off down the road. Do you agree? That's why we have the China study. If Mr. Campbell had not taught young Colin that, we would not have the China study. We would not have the term plant-based. The importance of cleanliness. There's a challenge with cleanliness back in the 1860s. Folks had challenges there of being clean. They didn't understand the issue of germs as well back then. Lack of a well-balanced lifestyle contributes to stress, worry, negative predisposition, discouragement, and even unchristian attitudes such as an unforgiving spirit. A lack of well-balanced lifestyle. So as we look at those 8 laws of health, having abstemiousness, moderation in the good stuff, total abstinence in the bad stuff. Bottom line, how can it affect us? It can affect whether or not you have a forgiving spirit. Is that important? Now, we are a hospital for sinners, yes? Okay. So we have to have forgiveness, yes? But what did God say about forgiveness? If you can't forgive, how can I forgive you? Yes? Is that what he said? So if you don't have a forgiving spirit, then could that cause problems with God forgiving us? Based on our lifestyle. Those 8 laws of health. Did you see why God gave us those 8 laws? Does God want us to be successful? Does He want to set us up to fail? No. Think of how much you love those 2 girls. Yes? Especially Mama. Mama's got something that, I love my young'uns and I love my grandkids, but I tell you, my wife's got more of that love than I do. I don't know why. I just think it's because she's a woman, a mama. But I got a lot. But it's just like she's got even more. Jesus has even more of you. And God has more than we do, than even the mamas have. He doesn't want to set us up to fail. He's given us those 8 laws so that we can have that, it's unchristian attitudes such as, so that's just an example. But if we follow those 8 laws of health, we get our sleep. Have you ever not got your sleep and been ill the next day? Not ill with the flu, but ill with people? Yeah. In order to preserve health, temperance in all things is necessary. That is not moderation in all things. It's temperance. The other word for temperance is what? Abstemiousness. Moderation in the good stuff, total absence in the bad stuff. Temperance in all things is necessary. So in order to preserve health, temperance in all things is necessary. So we're not going to have good health if we don't have what? Temperance in all things. Okay. Temperance in labor. Temperance in eating. Temperance in drinking. Now, is that saying I can drink alcohol? What does temperance mean? Abstemiousness. Abstemiousness. Abstemiousness is what? Moderation in the good stuff, drinking this. Total abstinence in drinking the other clear stuff that comes from the mountains where I am. We call it canning our corn in a jar. This one's water. That other stuff looks like water too. Oop. So, in order to preserve health, temperance in all things is necessary. Temperance in labor, temperance in eating, temperance in drinking. The value of a positive attitude, and you brought that up a few minutes ago. Having that positive attitude. Have you ever been around people that just ain't going to work? That ain't going to work. No, we tried that before. That ain't going to work. Have you ever seen, thank you, sir. Have you ever seen people that just aren't positive? They're negative? They're like a sponge pulling everybody down. We need to have a positive attitude, pulling people up. Very important. Any of y'all's mama or grandma say, if you can't say something right, don't say it at all? Have you ever heard that before? I heard it. Sometimes it's best just keep your mouth shut. Because not only does it affect the other person, can it affect you? Yes, it can. The relationship of physical health to spirituality we learned in this vision. Is that not a lot of stuff we learned? That was a big, important vision. The relationship of physical health to spirituality. Have you ever been sick or just not feel good and it's hard to just sit down and concentrate and study the Bible? Have you ever not felt good and just been short with people? It can affect our spirituality. The importance of following right principles in diet and in the care of the body. Now, have you ever heard the word hygiene? Now, when we think of hygiene, we think of using deodorant. I know when I worked in healthcare, there were some folks we just had to, we get complaints off the floor that Johnny I don't think he owned a bar of soap or deodorant. And so it was somebody's job to let Johnny know what he needed to do. And we called it hygiene. It was actually in our manual that you had to maintain proper hygiene to stay an employee. If you didn't have good hygiene, then you could get written up. But let's take hygiene a little further. Let's go back 159 years and look at what hygiene was. It's the care of the body is what hygiene is. So it's not just using deodorant or brushing your teeth. How other ways can we care for the body? Hygiene means caring for the body. How else can we care for the body? Exercise. That's hygiene. Yes. Pardon?
Bath in a number 3 tub.
Yeah, take a bath. When I was a boy, there was a saying up on the mountain. I grew up on the mountain. You could tell if a person went to church or not because they'd take a bath on Saturday night. But if they didn't get a bath on Saturday night, they usually take it once a month, whether they needed it or not. Bathing is hygiene. Yeah. Changing your clothes, changing your socks is hygiene. But what about mental health? Could that be hygiene? It could. Your thoughts, controlling your thoughts. There's some folks their thoughts are in control of them. They're not in control of their thoughts are in control of them. If I take this and I let go of it, what will happen? And it's called the law of, there's a law of the mind. And here's how it is. It is a law of the mind that it gradually adapts itself upon the subjects of which it is trained to dwell. What you think about is very, very important. There's some things that we don't need to have OCD on. How Susie looked at me the other day. Did you see Sally last Sabbath at potluck? She didn't get any of my spaghetti. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. The importance of following right principles in diet and in care of the body. In the care of the body, also in care of the mind. The effects of eating pork, we learned then, that pork was a problem, that we shouldn't eat pork. Science will tell you today there's challenges with eating pork. The benefits of nature's remedies, clean air, sunshine, exercise, pure water. Now we're getting into some of these 8 laws specifically. Other major health reforms, laws of health, nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, pure air, rest. Used to, I couldn't say this, the last one. When I go into the school system, I was in the school system this week teaching a program I call the Brain Team. And as I go in there and teach K through 8, and sometimes I go to the high school and I call them the Brain Team. Used to, I'd have to have them pull out their money and say, what's on that money? Every piece of money has the same saying on it. And I'd say, what does it say on there? And the kids would say it. And I say, well, there's these doctors in California found that what you just said is very important. It must be important. Our government put it on our money. And these doctors found if you follow what this is, that you'll be healthier. Well, now in the state of Tennessee, it is the law that there has to be in every school. In Kentucky, North Carolina, Florida, various places throughout the United States. I don't know if Georgia requires that or not. But now I can say trust in God as I talk to the kids. And as I talked about this last Tuesday when I went to the school, I talked about trusting God. And I don't have to worry about getting the teachers in trouble or me in trouble. But these major 8 laws we learned about in that vision 100 and how long? 59 years ago. The medical missionary work is to be a part of every church, we learned. Every member is to be a medical missionary. The medical missionary work is to be an entering wedge for the gospel. The gospel and health reform are not to be separated. Now, here's the confusion. We got the preacher to do his job. We got the healthcare person to do their job. And so you have a patient that has a certain question on religion. So what do? You get out your phone and you call the preacher and say, "Preacher, I got this woman. She'd like to know about Sabbath. Can you? When can you get together with this woman? Y'all talk to each other." Well, God at times puts things in people's minds that He may just put right then. And maybe a week later when the preacher has time, she ain't got no interest in it. You know what I'm saying? When I come off the mountain to a wreck on I-40, I'm wearing a fire hat. And as I get out of the truck and I see the car is mangled around the person, which I see often, I don't say, "Well, I'm just a firefighter. I'll wait on the rescue squad to get here." No, I got Jaws of Life on the truck. I'm trained. Take my fire hat off. I put on my rescue hat. And I get out there and we rip that car open and we get those people out. And then I'm noticing that person's bleeding awful bad. Well, I don't say, "Well, wait on the ambulance to get here." No, I'm trained in EMS. So I put on my EMS hat and I start doing patient care. Or maybe it's a hazardous material situation. And I don't say, "Well, let's wait on Morristown to get here." No, I'm trained in hazardous material. We'll deal with that problem. I put on my hazmat hat. God says it's not to be separated, gospel and health reform. We don't say the preacher just does preaching and you just do health care. He does preaching and health care. You do health care and preaching. Gospel, that is. They're not to be separated. And as you work with that person and they have a concern, like that girl that came in that was the hospital center, the ER center, because she was coming off drugs, do you think I could have just gone and said to this girl, "You go to church"? No. This lady came in one time, and I'll finish with this. There's more there, but let me help you see the importance of this. I was sitting there and I was talking to this couple. He was a retired sheriff out of California and he had diabetes. And I'm sharing with him what he needs. I'm teaching him, what the causes of insulin resistance are. What are the items that causes insulin resistance? How can we correct those items of insulin resistance so that his type 2 diabetes can go away? Mary Lou comes up and she says, "I need your help." Well, she doesn't usually pull me away from people unless something's terrible awful. So I said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." So I walk over to the counter, that same counter that Stephanie was talking about that book and wondering where that woman lived, or that E.G. White. She didn't know it was a lady. And this lady's a squalling. Now, y'all know what squalling means. Crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "We just left the doctor, and the doctor said my husband has a 10 out of 10 in severity of an infection, and he's going to die." She said that I just left CVS Pharmacy, and I was begging them for more medication, and they said there was no medication, that we'd use the strongest thing there was. And they told me to come over and see you. You might be able to help. I said, "Well, what's your husband got?" And y'all know what MRSA is? Well, this is the type that's vancomycin resistant. And that gets pretty serious. I said, "Yes, ma'am, that's very serious." Now, I don't know what the physician was using, 10 out of 10 as his tool, but that's what he told him. And basically, he'd said he'd done everything he could. There's nothing else could be done. And he was going to die. And I said, "Well, I've got something. It works for MRSA very well. but I've never used it for vancomycin resistance. I said, does your husband believe in God? And she goes, nope. I said, okay. I said, well, only God does the healing. I do have something that if you would like to try it, I'd recommend trying it. And she says, I want my husband to live. I'll do anything. I said, okay. So I went back and got it and brought it up. And I said, this does not heal. Only God does the healing. I want to make that clear. And do you mind if Marilyn and I pray that God will bless this, that it will heal your husband? And she says, I told you, I'll do anything. Yeah, you can do whatever you want to. I want my husband to live. So, okay, so we both prayed that God would bless this and that her husband would be healed. 2 weeks later, she comes back in. And she said, 1 week later, she comes back in. And she says, all happy. And she says, the doctor said it's now 4 out of 10 in severity. Now again, I don't know the measurement tool he was using. And she's gone. 2 weeks later, total of 3 weeks, she comes back in. And she says, she's real happy. She says, it's gone. It's gone. The doctor says it's plumb gone. Totally healed. And then she says something I was not expecting. She says, my husband now believes in God. Now, what if I had said, oh, this bottle of this, it'll heal your husband? Or if he is healed, it's this? Or what if I said, well, I've done this for a while, it's me that's healing your husband? When we give credit to God, where credit's due, and if you don't give credit to God, you'll probably fall and bust your nose. And so the lady, she's gone. That was in 2005. Or thereabout, 2005. 2 years ago, I'm standing, we've got this big herb cabinet, which is about as big as that wall right there at work. And I'm standing there working at some things, and this lady comes in, she says, my husband is trying to quit smoking. You got anything to quit smoking? And I said, yeah. I said, do a fourth of a cup of honey, 3/4 of a cup of lemon juice, and 1/3 of a teaspoon of peppermint essential oil. And take a nip anytime he gets a hankering. And y'all know what that is here in Georgia, right? A nip and a hankering. A nip is a desire for, or a nip is a little bit and a hankering is a desire for. And she goes, okay. And she starts out the door. She writes it down. So it was what was the recipe? 1/4 of a cup of honey, 3/4 cup of lemon juice, and 1/3 of a teaspoon of peppermint essential oil. So she's heading out the door. And I said, wait a minute, don't forget the most important thing. She goes, is it the peppermint or the lemon juice? I said, prayer. Pray. And she comes back in the door. She says, you don't remember me, do you? I said, no, ma'am, I don't. So she starts telling me the story. It was that woman. And I said, ma'am, so I walk on over to her and I said, I got some questions for you. Same husband? Yes, same husband. Still alive all those years later. Does he still believe in God? And she goes, oh, yeah. Now this time it was huge, bright face. Oh, yes, he believes in God. And I said, you left before I got to ask you last time. And this has been years. I said, do you believe in God? And again, just even brighter, oh, yes, I believe in God. And she says, it all happened right here. And she points to the floor where she'd been standing that first time she come in. And I said, so what are y'all doing church-wise? And she says, oh, we're very involved in the Lincoln Baptist Church. She's like, I got to go. I'm running late. She's gone. I don't know what God has in plan for this lady. But has she come a long ways? Can you imagine if I had gone on the streets of Newport and come up to this man who's atheist, his wife is atheist, and said, you need to believe in God? Do you think they would have listened? I tried that last month over in Sweden. I was there for 2 weeks teaching. And we took a day out and went to Gothenburg and was trying to teach people about God. And they told us that 87% of the people in Sweden are professed atheist. They had no interest. None. No interest. There's a few that got some books and things, but you try to talk about God? No. So if I had tried to, in the town of Newport, and walked up on this couple and said, let me tell you about Jesus. Not interested. But do you see how health opens the door as the right hand and allows the gospel to walk through? Do you see how the gospel and health reform are not to be separated? How you're supposed to wear both hats? The health hat and the gospel hat, or the gospel hat and the health hat? Inspiration says that a pastor will be twice effective if he also understands and knows how to do medical missionary work. It's true. It is. So I encourage y'all today. It's been soon to be 160 years. And as we look at these items, are we really doing anything with them? Harvard is. Cornell is. Mayo Clinic is. But are we? I encourage you to go back and study this health message that God has given us. Mind, character, and personality. Temperance. Counsels on diet and foods. There's just jewels of information there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm ready too, buddy. We're going to sing for our closing song, number 322, but we need to take up a love offering for this man. I did emphasize a couple of times already today. What time did he leave home? 5 o'clock this morning. Drove down here. And he does this stuff for free.